Hi, everyone.
Hello.
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 Miss Nicole, I'm going to transfer. Because I have to head to an appointment, so I'm going to transfer. You're going to see that in a second, okay? Thanks.
Okay, how many do we need for our quorum, Nicole? You're on mute.
5.
5, okay. I think we made it, right?
1 minute. I have another meeting that I'm staffed for right back to this. I'm just getting it all in front of me.
Got it.
We'll have to coordinate internally on that because that's obviously a conflict. I apologize for being late. Yes, we have quorum. We have 5.
Okay, great. I almost forgot that I was the chair of this committee. And thank you, Chris, for getting the agenda together while I was out last week. I appreciate that. So we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. And why don't we go ahead and have our committee members introduce themselves?
I can go to the list if you like, if that's helpful.
That would be great. Thank you.
Lisa.
I think that was me, Bisa French, Richmond PD Chief.
Kira.
Hi, Kira Faulkner, Probation Manager.
Robin.
Robin Lepetsky, Public Defender.
Dinah.
Dinah Bagdon, District Attorney.
Michael.
Michael Pearson, Private Attorney, Key Counsel PC.
Cheryl.
Cheryl said. Me.
Stephanie.
Stephanie Medley with the Rise Center.
Jill. Lynette.
Lynette Williams, Stand Together, Contra Costa.
I see Dale Harrington.
Yeah, I didn't know I was a member of the committee.
No, I'm just announcing.
Oh, okay.
Are you a member of the public? Are you staff to the county?
I'm a member of the county. I live in Walnut in Rossmore.
All right. Patrice.
Thank you. And Melvin is here as well. Welcome, Melvin.
Afternoon, everyone.
All right, well, let's jump into it. Are there any announcements before we get started from the committee members? Okay, we'll open it up now for public comment, and public comment is for anything that is not on our agenda. So we will open that up now for any public comments. All right, seeing that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. So our next agenda item is the approval of the record of action from our May 20th meeting. And I'm assuming everyone's had a chance to take a look at the last meeting agenda. Are there any edits that need to be made to that? Okay, if not, I'll open it up for a motion to approve the minutes from May 20th.
I move that we approve the May 20 minutes.
Thank you, Bisa. Can I get a
I
second?
second. I second.
Thank you, Kara. And we do a roll call vote, please, Nicole.
Lisa,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes, ma'am.
Stephanie.
Yes.
And I don't think Kamisha is here. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is to review the working draft of the diversion recommendations. And that's attachment 2 of our packet, page 5.
Madam Chair, if I may jump in on this one.
Yeah, I was gonna hand it over to you because I was assuming.
I would just say, so this is the second time that this group has seen what is essentially a preliminary draft of recommendations. If you've had to look at them, they're pretty basic. They were based on what we knew at the time, at the beginning of the year, which was not much. And so speak to some sort of guiding principles that we could use to make recommendations based on what we knew, right? So we know that that we need, thank you, Nicole. We know that we would want to have diversion programs housed within community-based organizations. We know that we would want them to be equitably located throughout the county so that folks have access to them regardless of where they are. And that we would want to have some way to monitor the utilization of diversion programs by race and ethnicity to make sure that they're having the desired impact in terms of racial equity, right? And I thought since the last couple of meetings were looking specifically at programs, I should also say, I apologize for any background noise that you guys hear. It is really, really hot today. So I have the fan blowing. That's not your computer or your speakers messing up. That is my fan trying to keep me cool. But where was I? So we've heard over the last couple of meetings about youth programs, diversion and alternatives, right? And while we're pausing before shifting to, Nicole, we see your email right now. While we're pausing the shift between youth and adult programs, we have an opportunity to take a second based on what we've heard about the youth programs to see if there's anything that we need to add or revise as far as the recommendations that were drafted in the past. And in particular, I don't know that this necessarily needs to be a recommendation, but something that I would raise for consideration in that regard, which probably needs to be fleshed out a lot more, but just was something that popped up for me based on what we have seen and heard. Is more about responding or being responsive directly to programmatic needs, right, as much as possible. And I'll give you an example, right? So the first meeting, if you guys recall, a couple of months back, the first meeting that we had where we heard directly from, an organization that offers programming, it was RISE, right? RISE was the program that was able to get their materials in, on time. And so we had them present and had a representative from the DA's office talk about also the restorative justice program at RISE. And what I recall from that conversation was we're talking about restorative justice, and a rep from the DA's office was saying the restorative justice programs are meant for offenses where there's a person who has been harmed, right? And for example, said say a graffiti type offense, right? Like that wouldn't be something that would be eligible because it's, it's not the same as someone was, directly impacted in a way. That means that there can be some, atonement and, a conversation about how that person was impacted and such. And I bring up that example because we also saw that same day, like, and I don't want to put all of this on RISE, right? RISE has limited capacity and you know what I mean? There's only so much that RISE can do, but RISE has, based on what we saw, like these really great art programs and such, right? So I was like, graffiti wouldn't fall into restorative justice, but is there some way that a youth who might have had that type of offense could get connected to those types of art programs or something to that effect, right? Because you clearly have some sort of interest in art. What can we do with that, as opposed to maybe having that, go into the system in a different way? I don't know that graffiti would be enough. There would be enough offenses to warrant, a big program for that. But just thinking, that we want to make sure that we're monitoring what the most common offenses are that youth are coming in for, so that we're developing the relationships to hopefully develop or help to pivot into programs with community partners that could respond directly to those needs. And so that was just one of the thoughts that popped into mind that might make for a recommendation along the lines of the stuff that we have on the screen. It also could be considered, like many things may be, considered such a given that you think you don't need, direct language for it. But was just just a specific example that came to mind for me based on what we heard that I wanted to raise for your consideration and discussion if necessary, as far as the recommendations we have now.
Thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions?
I have, I guess, a comment. I know we had a lot of, we had several presentations, and there are a lot of programs out there, and they're, all great programs. I don't know if I heard anything that really addressed mental health. And, are we doing anything that we're going to address mental health? Because so much of the issues that we're having with our criminal system surround mental health. So many issues we're having with homelessness surround mental health. And my experience with even dealing with the mental health court, it's great that we have something in place, is even trying to get a referral to mental health court is tough. There's so many clients that I've had that have mental health issues that should not be in jail that are sitting in jail. There's no other programs in place or other alternatives for them. They should not be sitting in jail when there could be alternative programs. I'm just wondering, are there recommendations we can be looking for or recommending that address mental health? Or is that something that's on our radar to touch on more mental health diversion, or just to kind of even tackle that issue? I mean, this may not be the forum for it at all, and I know this is there is a lot of mental health issues, in the Black community and other racial minorities, and just in general in our society. But I just wonder, are we going to touch upon that, or is this something that's beyond our scope?
Thank you, Michael. And I see Robin has her hand raised, that she can probably speak to some of that.
Yes, thank you, Michael. That is such an important topic. I think we are planning to have presentations on mental health diversion coming up. I think that's part of what we're going to schedule today, are those presentations. We had it on the agenda earlier and we had to move it because we didn't have room for it at the meeting it was scheduled for. But the attorney in my office who oversees the mental health diversion for the public defender's office is willing and able and ready to present to this body whenever we're ready to invite her. So we will be discussing at least how the mental health diversion is working right now in this county for adults.
I would suggest that we may add that to our tracking under point 3, that we may want to consider adding mental health to something that we also track as part of this whole, gender, ethnicity, and race. We may want to add that to something that we keep, statistics on.
I would just briefly say that for mental health, for the people who are in mental health diversion, the presumption is that they meet some kind of diagnosis because they need to do that to get into the program. I think if you're talking about tracking mental health for non-mental health specific diversion programs, you run into a lot of difficulty with HIPAA, or if you're going to do self-reporting, you're not going to have real accurate data. That's just my gut reaction to trying to track that kind of data, but I don't know how anybody else feels about that, or if we have examples of other situations where they're able to track mental health status or behavioral health status.
I think there's a site that I work in a different state that has some dashboards that seem to track some of this information. I can look at those, and for next meeting, at least have some sense of what exactly they're tracking. Because to your point, Robin, it's obviously it's not just a free for all. Hey, this person may have had an episode at some point. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be something like that. It's going to be pretty specific and may refer directly to diagnoses or prescriptions, something along that line. But I can at least have an example or an idea of at least a way that it's been done in a different state, which may or may not be replicable, just depending on regulations of such things, but to give people an idea.
Any other questions or comments or suggestions for these recommendations? One thing that I will say, back to your point, Chris, just taking the example that you gave, if a young person doesn't necessarily fit within the criteria for the RJD diversion, which we've had some of those young people that don't necessarily fit within that criteria, we do try to figure out what are some of the other supports that we can potentially provide for them. And it looks a little different given that young person. But even if they don't meet the criteria, because the criteria for the RJD program is pretty intense, and maybe they don't need that level of support, we do try to figure out how exactly can we support that young person. That's not to say that there still needs to be more programs to support those young people. Any other comments on this, on our recommendations? And also, Mike, we provide clinical services at RISE as well, but it's not enough. We still need more services, mental health supports for young people in the county. So, and specifically for RISE, we don't have any Medi-Cal restrictions, and sometimes that's a huge hurdle preventing folks from getting the supports that they need.
Stephanie,
Cheryl? Cheryl, were you saying something?
Cheryl. Yes, ma'am.
Were you saying something? Maybe not. If you are saying something, I can't hear you. I don't know if. Okay. Well, if you can put, if you're saying something and if you could put it in the chat, that would be great because we can't hear you. And all right, so Chris, hopefully I'm hoping Cheryl heard me to put what she was saying in the chat. What are the next steps for this?
I think the next steps basically are, so based on some of the things that we talked about, for one, sort of giving folks an idea of a way that mental health might be tracked to see if that's something that people are open to including in recommendations, and bringing you another iteration of this. I'm thinking that iteration. It looked like she dropped in. Are you here? Okay.
I think so.
She's down at the bottom of the screen because I know she was on two different devices. So maybe one of them is missing and the other is still there, but it's not active. Yeah, so
it dropped me. Sorry. Sorry, Chris.
all good.
I was just saying, I know that diversion programs require both parties to be wondering what if one want to collaborate, especially if the youth is not willing to collaborate, then what is the alternative for that youth?
Cheryl, your sound is really funky. You may need to turn off one of your devices so we can hear you.
And Cheryl, I also put a message for you in the chat. If you could type your comment, that would be helpful because we can't hear you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't turn off the other device. I'm not there anymore. Just FYI.
Okay. So while Cheryl is typing her comment, Chris, you were saying?
Yeah, just that I think the forthcoming iteration probably, I mean, we can probably revisit this after we've had the adult programs that are willing to come in, which will lead to some changes anyway. Because if we don't, we end up having this conversation in the same meeting that those discussions are scheduled, and one of those could end up impacting the other in terms of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
And how many adult programs do we have that are going to be presenting?
I don't think we're sure yet. I think that's why I wanted to make sure to include that on the agenda so that we could talk about it.
Okay, got it. Okay.
While she's typing, I think what I heard from what Cheryl was saying is essentially what happens if the youth is not willing to participate in a diversion program. Generally, that is a part of sort of the protocol for a diversion program to go into effect for a youth. So at least on the youth end, what happens what are the options that are left if a youth is unwilling to engage with a particular diversion program?
Diana, I think I saw you come off mute. Were you going to say something?
Was that for me?
Yes.
Oh, no,
Oh, no, I thought you were coming off mute to say something.
no. I think
Okay.
my book was already off me. Mhm.
Okay. Well, I know for us, I mean, we've had young people initially not want to participate in the program. And after, because part of our program also is how do we build relationships with the young people that have caused the harm as well. And so sometimes, like initial meetings, there's some hesitation. And so after our restorative practice specialists work with them a little bit more, they usually have a change of heart and do want to participate in the program and see um, the good in the program. So we haven't had anybody that's just refused and then not change their mind yet. But I mean, that is something to keep in mind what does happen if a young person does refuse.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I really appreciate Cheryl for raising that question, because that just reminds me of the way that process was described during the original presentation, which essentially sounds like it could be, at least relatively speaking, like a best practice, right? Like something to shoot for, right? Is to maybe not have it be like an all or nothing decision the moment that you sit down in an office with a person you don't know and don't trust, and you feel really scared or particularly intimidated, and it sounds like something you don't want to be part of. Not just having this sort of ultimatum discussion with you: if you don't do this, then blah blah blah. But taking the time over time to do some relationship building and some work. Ultimately, that is the choice. It seems like, right? If you don't, then the case goes forward, and further into the justice system. But I think the ability to take some time to really let people sit with the information, to check with them, and for there to be maybe a certain amount of time for those conversations to take place before a final decision has to be made might be worth putting in a list of recommendations for, highlighting at least for other programs.
Agree. Okay. I just lost my agenda. Before we move on from this agenda item, are there any last comments? Okay, we'll move on to our next topic, which is discussing and scheduling the diversion program, for adults. Chris, was there anything?
I mean, it's just, all I'll say is, as we've referred to, right, the last couple of meetings, what we've been doing is hearing from diversion programs for youth. The point was always to come back and do the same thing for adults. That's something that probably without a transition, we might have gone directly into or been looking to do. To be honest, I kind of got a little distracted by the sort of turn of events, right, that led to us having a new chair, and it would have been on some of us in the support role to have that continuity to say, hey, remember, we're supposed to do this thing coming up next meeting or sometime soon. So because that was something that we were always going to do, and I know like as Robin spoke to, she was already sort of ready to put that in motion in terms of the folks that she has a relationship with in that regard, and we had to pause it. Just wanting to circle back to this item to see what programs we need to be reaching out to, and who has those relationships and can make those initial contacts to see if people are available for our next meeting and if they're going to have materials that they need to share and so on and so forth, so that we get a sense of how adult programs actually work and to what extent that might lend itself to, further recommendations.
Does anyone have any comments? When is our next meeting scheduled?
July 15th.
One thing that might be helpful is to pull back up the list of diversion programs that we compiled. Go through the adult programs and then just see who has the bandwidth to either find somebody to speak on that diversion program or how to get that set up. Like, I know I can do the behavioral health diversion. I certainly can have someone do that.
Robin,
I believe I can share this because it was already in a previous meeting, so I can share that list.
thank you, Nicole. So it looks like we have the mental health diversion, one for drug offenses, and then the misdemeanor misdemeanor diversion. I can't tell what that next one is. What is it?
That's Longacre diversion. That goes along with misdemeanor diversion.
Okay.
Sorry, did we do pre-trial yet?
I didn't say it out loud, I don't think, because Robin had just.
I'm just highlighting it because there's a lot here, so. And we haven't done the district attorney misdemeanor yet?
No. And just to clarify, you're saying that, Robin, you were saying that the misdemeanor and the Longacre are the same thing, or?
Well, Longacre diversion is, what we should do is add another category that's called judicial diversion. So there's a new statute that I think has launched a new ability for the court to agree to do diversion without the district attorney's approval. And so it's kind of the shorthand for that is judicial diversion. And that came about, I think, after we put this list together. And Longacre diversion is sort of fits in with that. So I don't know, Dinah, if you want to jump in here, but I would suggest we maybe create, instead of Longacre diversion, I would create another category called judicial diversion and put Longacre diversion underneath that. What Longacre diversion is the name of a judge that was in this county a long time ago that used to do this. It's just the judge saying, I'm going to put this over for X amount of time, usually like 6 months. And then if there have been no further offenses or arrests, the case just gets dismissed. So it's sort of a diversion, and the only terms are you don't get into trouble again for a period of time.
I think this is Dinah, I'd also recommend adding although it's not what we typically think of in terms of diversion, but I think a declination of charges category would also be important to lift up as well. So that we have an identified category of, like, for example, with drug cases, those are being referred to treatment as opposed to getting criminal charges and things like that. And then there's a list of many other cases as well. So I think at least it would be worth a presentation to this group.
Am I saying that right? Declamation?
Declination, yes.
Is it declination, declining charges?
No, declination.
Declination,
Declination.
declining.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then we have military diversion.
I can bring someone to discuss that as well,
Okay.
or offer someone up.
Is that corrective solutions? Community accountability program? Who runs that?
That's the DA's office, I think.
Okay. Diana, is that your office?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
Okay. And then neighborhood courts?
The DA's office.
Okay. Does it make sense to have, it seems like this is a lot to have for one day of presentations. Well, and I don't know, but it seems like it's a lot. Do we need to break this out into 2 separate meetings?
So I would suggest maybe having, oh, sorry, Dinah, go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead. I didn't think it would be a lot.
Okay.
Well, I have just learned that my behavioral health court and mental health diversion attorney is not available on July 15th. So maybe we want to start with.
What is the date?
program.
What's the presentation date?
7/15.
Of July?
Yeah.
Oh, let me just double check that. I think I'm not available either.
So Robin, for sure, you all would have to present in August. Okay.
I'm checking on the military diversion piece right now, but I know the mental health piece we can't do in July.
Okay. And just to the group, are there any other programs? I don't know if there are any law enforcement run programs or probation programs specifically for adults that we may have missed. No? Okay. All right, so it's looking like we'll tentatively have some presentations for the 15th. And some for our August session. And yes, community service programs. Thank you, Cheryl. Would that be probation, Kira?
I'm sorry, say that again?
For community service programs for adults? Would that be probation?
Or where am I looking? It
Just
doesn't sound familiar.
not on there. Just for community service programs for adults.
We wouldn't, probation wouldn't present on that. We don't run a diversion program for adults.
Okay.
Right.
Community service is usually a sentencing alternative
Yes.
and not technically a diversion program,
Okay.
unless Cheryl's talking about something else. What is our August date? Do we know that?
The 19th.
19th.
Calendar.
Yeah, August 19th.
Okay.
I'm unfortunately going to miss the next two meetings then, July and August. I'll be out of town for both.
Okay, thanks for the heads up, Lisa. So why don't we do this? There's some coordination that needs to happen offline. We have the dates for the next two meetings and a good idea of what programs that we need to hear from. So we can do some of that coordination offline and get things together. Any other questions or comments anybody wants to lift up before we move on? Okay, so our next topic is the diversion definition and sharing that with the definition and guidelines and sharing that with the JJCC.
Yeah. So this is something that we discussed in the past, and I seem to remember it. You know, I seem to remember being voluntold to do this. I don't have a problem with that. I just am not familiar with JJCC dates and you know, meeting times and such. So at least trying to get a sense of when their meetings are held, so that I could try to get on an agenda here pretty soon to share the work that you all did on your definition and guidelines, to see if there's you know, any need for coordination or you know, I think based on my understanding, it sounds like whatever work the JJCC is doing as far as diversion and in terms of building similar documents seems pretty closely aligned. So good idea to share and just make sure we're on the same page. Happy to do it. Just need to know where to be and when to be there.
So it would probably be good for us to connect with RDA and ISA on getting you on an agenda for that. I think they already had the meeting this month. It may have been last week when I was off. So we can get that going for next month, maybe. Okay, that's it.
Frank was definitely not healthy. Pretty sure coming out of that anal line. Healthy there?
Mm-hmm.
It should be like liquid, like chicken soup.
All right. Well, I'll open it up before we go because we have finished in like record time. But anything else that's just burning for anybody before we get out of here?
Can we just recap? So next time's agenda is me focus on presenters for adults. Is that right?
Yes.
Would there be anything else besides the approval of minutes and all that standard?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's just time for the presentations and discussion.
All right.
Yeah, and there's always a chance that something comes out of another subcommittee meeting that we need to address or something like that. We can add that if we need to.
So as of now, yeah, but stay tuned. Things always change. All right, everybody. Well, it was great seeing your faces. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.